Back to Benromach. Any plans in the near future to up the ABV of the core range? I'm sure you were expecting this question. I don't know if you've heard any of our conversations before, but the Gordon and MacPhail switched a lot of their previously bottled 43% whiskeys to 46. And we're wondering if the core range will do the same for Benromach soon.
Hey, welcome to Sipper Social Club. I'm Jeremy.
This is Whiskey in the Six. I'm Rob.
Welcome to the Whisky Rant Podcast.
It's a little crusty.
It's frustrating.
And it's going to be a little bit of a rant.
I don't understand it. I don't know why.
Some sort of injustice.
Anyway, end rant.
Hello and welcome back to the Whisky Rant Podcast. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Rob.
And tonight we have a very special guest with us from Gordon and MacPhail. Richard Urquhart's on the show. Richard, how are you tonight?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on your show. So, yeah, great to be here.
It was about a year ago, almost to the day,
pretty much,
that we met
exactly.
you in Vancouver, BC, and you gave us the absolute insane honor of trying the 80-year-old Glen Gordon MacPhail bottling, which just absolutely blew our minds right out of the water. For people that don't know, why don't you introduce yourself? What's your title, your relationship with Gordon MacPhail?
Yeah, so my name is Richard Urquhart. I'm a member of the fourth generation of the Urquhart family, the owners of Gordon MacPhail, Benromach Distillery, and now the Cairn Distillery as well. And my day job is head of sales for the Americas, so a lot of time over in the US and Canada.
So you have given us another incredible whiskey for us to try tonight. This Gordon MacPhail, the Mr. George Legacy First Edition. You gave us an amazing sample box with this. Why don't you just quickly describe what we have poured here?
Yeah, so the Mr. George series first came out, what would have been my grandfather's 100th birthday. We did Mr. George Centenary. And due to the success around that release and due to the type of whiskey we're releasing under Mr. George, we decided to make it into a series. So we've done edition 1, edition 2, and the editions will continue for a few more years after this year as well. So it's all very much just trying to commemorate my grandfather and his impact on single malt whiskey. He was known for keeping the amber light of single malt whiskey alive in the 1960s and very earlier, when the whole world had their head turned towards blend. So this is very much a series of Glen Grant bottlings, all to commemorate Mr. George, as we called him.
So this one in particular is from 1953. It is bottled at 59.4% alcohol by volume. How, what serendipitous aging allows for such a high ABV in an old whiskey?
So a lot of it's done to where we store the casks, but also the casks themselves. And this is where Gordon and MacPhail really kind of comes into its own in terms of our wood policy and our wood management. We have matured whiskies longer as the whiskey we tried last year than most other companies in the world. So we have matured whiskey up to 80 years old. And that probably won't be the oldest whiskey that we've achieved. But we do know how to look at distillery character, the age we're trying to lay down whiskey for, and make sure we get the right balance we're looking for there. So with some of these old Glen Grant casks, Glen Grant was one of my grandfather's favorite distilleries. So the Mr. George series will always be Glen Grant up until maybe one of the final releases we do, but that'll be a few years before we can tell you about that one. But yeah, so going back to the whiskey itself, a sherry butt, European oak, you can see the color coming through there. It's dark, it's rich, and it's not lost a huge amount of strength. This one may have been filled at a slightly higher strength than 63.5, which is more common now. But even at that age and that strength, it's still perfectly balanced.
Speak to the distillate of something like Glen Grant that can withstand age, because I know we've had some whiskeys. I mean, you see some older bottlings of some stuff with distilleries like Glen Grant or Mortlock or Macallan. And what is it about that distillate that lets it age so well for so many years?
So I think distillery characters evolved decade by decade. So distillery character today, so we're not talking about quality here, we're talking about the actual character has changed in Speyside. We know that with our distillery, Benromach, when we made that older style. But back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, a lot of these Speyside distilleries in our local area were making quite full-bodied, heavy spirits. And they have stood the test of time. I mean, we have matured old Linkwoods, old Mortlocks, old Macallans, old Glen Grants, and they've all still come out well balanced and great for their age, even after, in some cases, such well, this one is 67 years old, so it's a youngster. It's not like the 80-year-old we tried last year.
It's a little younger.
The nose on this is out of control good.
Insane.
Do you want to even try to describe what you're getting on this?
So what the most shocking thing about the nose on this whiskey is how fresh the red fruits you get on the nose. Like it's just like this beautiful bouquet of like raspberries and ripe strawberries and that kind of which is shocking because like you said, it's 67 years old, but we shouldn't be too shocked because that 80-year-old that we did try last year was remarkably fresh for its age.
I think that's one thing that really blew us away about that 80-year-old, as well as this one, is how vibrant it is on the nose. And you're not getting just dusty old oak. You're getting so much fresh and really just vibrant fruit notes.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between this cask and the cask we used for the 80-year-old. So this is a European sherry butt. So whereas the 80-year-old was actually an American oak transportation sherry butt.
Right.
So we are getting out. So this whiskey probably wouldn't go to 80 years old because the cask would start to, the balance would fade away and it just start to be overpowered by the wood. So for what I love about these old Glen Grants from the 50s, I've had the privilege of trying many different casks and bottlings we've done over the last decade. And it's this kind of really kind of sweet candied fruit character you get coming through. Yeah. You get a bit of polish, a bit of raisin coming through there as well. And it's just one of my favorite kind of whiskeys to enjoy is some of these old Glen Grants. And we're very fortunate that Mr. Georoge had a big passion and love for that distillery, that we have good stocks of whiskies from Glen Grant going back to then.
Like this is just, I'm getting those like really nice like tea notes too, that like really fruity tea note that you get with older whiskeys.
I was gonna say that you really only get that with older whiskeys.
I mean, we've had some experience with Glen Grants, some older things too, 30 years, 30 plus, but this is just next level.
Yeah, this is absurdly rich. Just like it, when we first cracked these little bottles, the aroma filled the room, and that's only ever happened to me a couple times, and it was with full bottles. So I was absolutely shocked that happened.
It usually happens when something's like insanely peated, but this is just insanely fruit forward and amazing.
Yeah, legs are insane as well. Like it's like glued to the glass.
So Richard, tell us about like the cask selections and the process that you guys go through at Gordon and MacPhail when you have a huge warehouse of stuff. And how often are you trying this? How often do you go to these things and open them up and just get to the right point where you're like, this needs to be bottled right now?
Yeah, so I mean, when we look at our cask selection, we grade our casks out of 10. And our whiskey supply team and operations is looked after by my twin brother these days. So he learned from our current managing director, Gordon MacPhail, who learned from my uncle, who learned from my grandfather, who learned from my great-grandfather. So that knowledge about cask selection has been passed down through the generations to where we are today. And my brother's already starting to pass knowledge on to the team that he works with. So when we do a Mr. Georoge release, he wants it to be a 9 out of 10. Trying to explain his kind of grading scale is a 5 is a good whiskey, but that doesn't sound very good if you try and sell, oh, this whiskey's a 5. Right. So, but that means it does what it says it should be. That's an okay whiskey. To be a Gordon and MacPhail bottle, it probably needs to be higher, 6 or 7. To be a single cask bottle, it needs to be a bit higher again. And to be a Mr. Georoge release, it needs to be a 9 out of 10. My brother has never given a 10 out of 10 to any whiskey yet. I think that's because he's always still searching to find that perfect whiskey. He may never find it. Maybe he'll find it on his last day before he retires, but he's always looking for, and he always talks about what is the best representation of that distillery, because every distillery's got a different character. So we use different types of casks to match to those types of spirits and different lengths of maturation. So we're always looking for that kind of what we call that balance between spirit, oak, and time, and making sure we can offer, well, great whiskey no matter what the age. So that's why if we do a 67-year-old or an 80-year-old, the quality of what we release has to be there. It's not just about the age statement, it's about having that balance.
I mean, I'm just living in this nose right now.
Yeah,
Like,
the nose is incredible.
Richard, paint us a picture. What does it look like at the Gordon MacPhail warehouse? Like, how are the casks organized? Do you have them in category of age or distillery? Or what does it look like when you walk in there?
I might be able to change my background if you give me a second and actually let you see
Yeah,
what it
let's
looks
take
like.
a look. Yeah, for
Okay.
sure. I mean, what a job that is to, have the accessibility to Gordon MacPhail. Because, like, I don't know, like, I've been told that you guys maybe have some of the most broadest selection of casks in your warehouse, maybe in all of Scotland.
Well, what we found interesting is some information that we stumbled upon that in a lot of, compared to a lot of distilleries or using a lot of other distilleries casks, you actually have older whiskey than they have at their own distillery of their stuff, the oldest whiskey.
So there's a key point here. So Gordon MacPhail's kind of process is not to buy mature whiskey or buy casks from distilleries. It's actually to fill our own casks at distilleries. So the Glenlivet 1940, that was a cask filled by my great-grandfather and grandfather, a cask we had sourced from Spain. We transported sherry across Scotland, bottled the sherry, and took that cask to Glenlivet and filled it. So for us, it's always about filling our own casks. So we can do that whole the whole maturation is done under Gordon MacPhail.
Mm-hmm.
That allows us to control the consistency and the quality of not only what we have today, but what we will have in the future as well.
So that's an idea in the background there of what the cask organization is like.
Yeah, so this is one of our warehouses in Elgin. So just next to our head office, we've got a racked warehouse and we've got a small dunnage warehouse there. And it's this picture shows that we have 9 decades worth of whiskey maturing right now. I think it's going to go, 9 decades. So not only 1930s, the 1940s all the way up to the 2020s. So that 9, I've been traveling a lot. So 9 decades worth of whiskey coming through there. And we have this range of around about 100 distilleries maturing in our ownership, and some of the oldest, and then probably the oldest whiskies and casks in the world. And this is the great thing about Gordon MacPhail, because it's all about putting more whiskey back in than we take out, laying down more spirit, so future generations will have access to the same kind of stock profile, hopefully, and probably a greater stock profile than what we have today.
Can you speak to like how many barrels we're talking? Like, what's the scale? Do you know how many barrels are currently aging in the warehouses?
Yeah, so I think it varies depending on when we bought when we got casks coming back in. But I'd probably say we've got roughly about 18,000 Gordon MacPhail casks. We probably about 20,000 Benromach casks. And we now have some Cairn casks coming in there as well. And this is probably the big thing for us in the future. If we were having this call back in the early 2000s, we'd have probably around about that 18,000 casks in total. So we've expanded the number of casks that we have. If we're sitting here in 10 years' time and having another chat, and we'll have 100,000 casks across the 3 parts of our business.
Wow.
And this is very much our investment for the future. We know that if we invest in casks to get the right quality wood, put good quality spirit into those casks, we will have really great whiskies in the future as well.
So Gordon and Benromach is, you guys are building a new distillery for Benromach, or is it just a warehouse for Benromach?
No, it's a brand new distillery. It's called the Cairn. So we have 3 parts of our business, just to kind of to go back with that. So Gordon MacPhail, the home of single malt whiskey, effectively bottling single malt whiskies. I think you mentioned they're bottling whiskies longer than some distilleries have. I think we have stock that's older than most distilleries have of their own single malts.
Yeah.
We have my grandfather's dream. So Mr. links into Mr. Georoge. My grandfather always dreamt that one day we'd make whiskey ourselves. And that became a reality in 1993 when we bought Benromach, and we reopened that distillery in 1998, 100 years after it first opened.
Wow.
But
we always joke with Richard with James that Gordon MacPhail has more Brora than Diageo has.
Yeah.
Do you think, is that true? Do you think that's true?
I think that'd be one to ask my brother. He doesn't let some of the sales guys like myself know exactly what we've got in there, just to make sure we keep stocks back. But then in a couple of years ago, we decided that we were going to build a brand new distillery. So this is a distillery called the Cairn. It's on the River Spey in a town called just outside Granton. You've got the Cairngorm Mountains just behind there, and it's a distillery that's very much more kind of modern than what Benromach is. So Benromach's all about old school tradition. making whiskey the way it was made in Speyside. Everything's done by hand and is crafted by Keith Cruikshank, our distillery manager, and his team of distillers. Their work there. The new distillery is built today for tomorrow. Modern architecture, uses technology. We try and make it as kind of sustainable as possible, and we're making a modern Speyside there rather than doing what we do at Benromach.
And when do you expect that whiskey to go to market?
So we're looking about 12 years down the road now. So
okay.
I think it's going to be a while before we can release a whiskey. But we do have a visitor centre open there now as well. And we do have a range of single malts, of blended malts you can try when you come and see us in the style of whiskey that we believe we're making at the distillery. So you can try a 12-year-old, an 18-year-old, 25-year-old, a 30-year-old, but even come and try a 70-year-old, which is something that hopefully that's the way the whiskey will turn out in 70 years' time.
Very interesting. Let's talk about quickly. You just took a sip of that.
No, I just took it. Sorry, I should say I've been sipping the Liquid 15. This is the Gordon and MacPhail Liquid 15 that has been around for many years, but recently changed to 46%. So I've been sipping that to like kind of prep my palate for this beast next to it.
So like liquid. So this is a good point, because like isn't Gordon MacPhail kind of known for taking malts and bottling them that were kind of just maybe in the blending market back in the day?
So I think if you go back in time to the 1890s, where we opened in 1895, distilleries would produce spirit. They would sell the spirit to blenders who would create their house blends. And some of those blends are the most famous whiskies in the world, like Chivas Regal, Johnny Walker. And Gordon MacPhail did the same type of, had his own house malts as well. But we also decided that we'd want to bottle whiskey as single malt. Everyone thought we were kind of crazy for doing that because there was no added value. The whole world wanted blended whiskies and we were offering single malts. But it meant that we could offer something that was unique. So we were approaching distilleries like Linkwood, Glenlivet, Macallan, Mortlake, and buying their spirits and then not bottling it as a blend under our name, but bottling it as a single malt. And that's where some of these labels come from. So that is Linkwood's original label from over 100 years ago. Wow. And that was what we were given to use when we wanted to bottle it as a single malt. So it was a nice way. We became effectively a licensed bottler for these distilleries and offered to the market at a time when there was very little single malt available.
We want to talk about Benromach real quick because
we should.
There's been a lot of buzz about this distillery recently by us as well. Yeah. It's been
the first to say. Well, we weren't the first to say. We found out we weren't the first to say, but it's
been coined the Springbank of the North.
The Springbank of the North, or at least of Speyside.
Springbank of Speyside. So a lot of good things from this distillery right now. We are really loving the cask strength bottlings.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
This one here was selected. This is the vintage 2010.
This is the 2010. Yeah,
amazing stuff. Just unbelievably good. Benromach in general, which obviously there's a rebranding that happened not too long ago. Where's the focus of this distillery going right now?
So it's all about old school Speyside. So it's that elegant, fruity, slightly smoky character you can taste in the cask strength are 10, 15, and 21-year-olds. So using our knowledge of how whiskey in Speyside has changed over the decades, we've gone back to create a spirit style which is more in line with having your own full maltings when you'd have been using a little bit of peat and drying your barley. And that's very much the focus. It's really kind of handcrafted. I know that's an overused term, but it literally is made by hand, using the skills of our distillers and making this kind of more traditional old school Speyside spirit.
Yeah, so James and I are hoping to collaborate with you at some point on a single cask pick of the Benromach. Hopefully that happens in the near future. We were debating whether to do a Gordon MacPhail or a Benromach, but I think the way Benromach is just hitting our palate lately, I really think that Benromach was the right choice. So
James has already been on the phone about that, and we are definitely looking at what options we can present to you. So we'll come back to you, arrange a selection of casks for you to have a look at.
Yeah,
fantastic.
I just took a sip of this.
Did you?
It is like so impactful on the palate. I don't think I've ever had that before. It's like the whiskey just held my tongue and wouldn't let it go. It's insanely viscous. The finish lasts forever. This is amazing. You got to be pretty proud about this bottling. This is out of control good.
I think this is the really nice thing about our family business. We get to work with these liquids and these casks that we've been passed down through generations. So we bottle these whiskies, but they weren't laid down by us, they were laid down by previous generations. So we get a nice thing to work with spirits from my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my dad, my uncles, my aunt, and everybody else that's involved in the business. But we get to take credit for their work as well, and listen to the market.
Hey, you knew when to bottle it, so that's half. That's
a big
portion.
Yeah.
So when you have the right cask in the warehouse, it makes your job a lot easier in our view. So, but then we also have the responsibility to make sure someone else can be sitting here in 30, 40, 67 years time talking about whiskies that we've laid down today. Yeah. So our active filling program across our distilleries and Gordon and MacPhail, we're all laying down whiskies to be another 80-year-old in 80 years time. Maybe even laying down whiskey today to be even older than that in 90 years time. And we are working on a very long-term kind of filling plan to make sure that these whiskies and offering the market these great aged whiskies isn't just something that we do just now, it's something that we can continue for generations to come.
Yeah, I love that. Build the legacy and keep it going forever. I mean, that's
We describe ourselves as custodians. So we take the business on from generation before us and we try to keep everything going and build and make it stronger and then pass it on to the next generation who will hopefully continue to do the same.
So this summer I went to Bahamas and we went to a place called Baha Mar, and then there's a portion of Baha Mar that's like outside of my affordability range, and it's called sandalwood, I believe, or something of that sort. And there was this like incredible aroma, like just sprayed throughout the entire building. It just smelled luxurious, and like the combination of nose and palate on this is like bringing me back to that spot. It's just unbelievable, like aromatic, like sweet sandalwood tea notes, and like just like some crazy stuff going on
here. The tea and the floral aspects coming in with this now, even like coffee, just so much stuff going on with this. It's so hard to describe. I've never had like this. I don't have enough Glen Grant experience to be like, this is a Glen Grant profile. It doesn't drink like Glen Grant really that I've experienced before.
I mean, I think when you get to this age category, it's not gonna, it's gonna be very hard to get that, like the distillery characteristic, I guess.
Yeah. Richard, can you speak to that? Like, does this Glen Grant read Glen Grant to you? Like, do you find the characteristic of the distillery in this?
Yeah. So if I try Glen Grant's from the 1950s, you get a very distinctive kind of flavor profile coming through there. And that is, okay, so the distillery character is maybe less than it would be if it was 10 years old.
Right.
But the consistency we get in our Glen Grants from the 50s demonstrate it's not just the wood, it's the distillery character that's there as well.
Yeah.
Over time, you kind of get character. If you're looking at a graph, you've got character and you've got time. Distillery character will come down over time and cask confidence will go up. So we're using the right cask right at the time to retain that kind of distillery character. It won't be 50-50, it will be, but you'll still get to taste that distillery character in there. I mean, for us, it wouldn't be worth releasing whiskey if we felt it wasn't the right quality, no matter what age it was. But the other thing to think about with this whiskey here, in 1953, there can be a huge amount of 1953 casks left in the world.
Right. Yeah.
So not only are you going to try something at 67 years old, and we can make more 67-year-old whiskey in 67 years' time. Right. But we can't go back in time and make more or fill more casks from 1953. So it is finite, it is unique, it is scarce. And that is something that we can, that is something that Gordon and MacPhail can offer the world, is these access to try these whiskies from the past.
I don't know how I go back to anything else after this. Like, it's just, what's so sad about trying whiskeys like this is that, like, immediately we're back to reality and they're not able to replace that taste ever again for a very, very long time.
But like, we've never had a bad bottling of anything that Gordon MacPhail's put out. Like, we're a big fan of the cask strength series, the connoisseurs. Like, everything we've had is good. Like, you guys have a rating system. What happens? Like, is there even a cask that falls below where you would be like, we can't bottle this under our name, then it goes into a blender? Like, what happens to whiskeys that don't meet expectations?
So we don't do any blends anymore. So that's something that we stopped a few years ago. I think in about 2018 is when we did our last kind of blends. So using our cask policy and our wood policy, and my brother and his team will grade our casks and they'll check them maturing the way they are. If a cask isn't maturing the way we expect, we can always give it more time. That's one thing we can do. We can just say, you know what, that cask needs more time before we feel it's ready to bottle. If something isn't going the way we expect and time won't fix it, we can move it into another cask to give it some more time to then increase, well, to get to where we expect it to be. But we're very fortunate the casks that we filled today, we're working with two bodegas in Jerez and one cooperage to get our sherry casks. We get them made to our specification. We get them seasoned with Oloroso sherry. For at least kind of our sherry hogsheads are at least 2 years and our sherry bottles at least 3 years. We then bring them back to Scotland. So we get very consistent sherry casks because we are specifying exactly what we're getting. So that means we are getting the consistency we're looking for in those whiskies. Most of the casks which are older than say 10, 15 years old, we know what quality they are already. They've been checked. They're on a journey that we're kind of mapping out. So we do obviously check them, and depending on the strength and where they are on that journey, they'll get checked more often. And then if we feel it's not going to progress and get any better, we will always bottle it and leave it in glass until we want to release it.
After all the whiskeys that you've tried we'll stick to Gordon and MacPhail. Where does this rank in your all-time favorite list?
So that's almost an impossible question to answer. Because it's about where I am, who I'm with, and the experience that goes along with it. So I think it's about really enjoying the experience when you get a chance to try these whiskies. I mean, I've been incredibly fortunate to try a lot of our older whiskies and share them with consumers and whiskey fans all around the world. And it is just this amazing experience to try these older liquids.
So as Jeremy was speaking to earlier, we've tried a lot of Gordon and MacPhail, and I've tried to compose a list of my top 50 whiskeys of all time. And recently I put out my top 10, and Gordon and MacPhail are 1 and 2 on that list. But the funny part is if you look at my top 50, they're appearing more than any other company, distillery, whiskey associate, whatever you want to call them. They are all over that list. So what you guys have done, even just as long as we've been fans of whiskey, has been phenomenal. Yeah, it's been incredible.
So something with our wood policy and the way we fill our casks is every cask we fill is destined to be a single malt bottling. That means we have to make sure it's right quality, that we can do single cask bottlings. It has to be, it's always, so I think that's really helped us when our strategy now is to do a lot more of these kind of conscious choice single casks or private collections, that each one is this kind of this unique offering. But we probably do release more whiskies in terms of expressions than most companies. So that's probably another reason why so many whiskies feature in your top 50, just about the volume of releases that we do these days, which is hundreds of single casks that go around the world.
Is there distilleries that are more willing to sell their distillate? Are there some distilleries that refuse to? We have a lot of bottlings from you guys, from Kalila, from Kleinleash, Mortlock, Linkwood. Are those distilleries more like, we'll sell our spirit over and ever? Are there some distilleries that won't?
So we don't fill out the same number of distilleries that we used to. That's part of the reason why we have 2 distilleries now, because we can see a trend forming and it will change the business not over my lifetime, but the next generation and probably beyond that. So we don't get to work at every distillery or fill casks at every distillery, but we still work with Diageo for Mortlock, Linkwood, Kalila, and a number of distilleries there. But part of that is down to our long-standing relationships with these companies and with these distilleries. If we started our business today, it'd be very hard for us to try and go out and get fillings at any distillery because we wouldn't have that reputation or that, well, there wouldn't be that faith in Gordon and MacPhail that we're going to release these amazing single malts.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that just more distilleries are keeping all their distillate for themselves just because whiskey is selling that much better now than maybe it was before?
I think it's to do with multiple factors. One is capacity. One is brands. Distilleries are brands now. They are, and they want to control their brands. We're the same with Benromach. So, I mean, we can completely understand why some distilleries don't want other whiskey bottlers to release their whiskey.
Yeah.
But for us, we will always try and fill the distilleries that we can for Gordon and MacPhail.
I'm just in awe.
I know.
Of this whiskey. I actually feel bad because although this is coming from your company, it's not you're not sipping it with us tonight, so I actually almost feel bad, but it is absolutely fantastic.
Now, is this cask aged in your dunnage warehouse?
So this would have been potentially, I wouldn't know exact location of the warehouse, but it would have been matured in Elgin lastly for the last couple of decades at least. All the old whiskies with casks we have are in the warehouse, which is next door to the one that you can see behind me.
Nice.
So where do you call home? Closer to Gordon and MacPhail or Benromach, or are they very close to each other?
I say exactly halfway between both of them. I couldn't pick a favorite, so I had to get a house that was 10 minutes from me, from Elgin, and 10 minutes from Forest.
Walking distance, good call. Yeah.
Not quite walking distance, 10-minute driving. So
these older casks allow you guys to do something that pretty much nobody else in the industry right now is doing, which is on a regular basis releasing really, really old whiskey. Macallan recently bottled an 81-year-old. Is that common? Like, do you think that they still have stuff that's older than what you guys have, or do you guys know if they source that through someone else or anything of that sort?
I think it's there will be other old casks in distilleries warehouses. We don't actually get a huge amount of sight of what they have there. I'm pretty confident that the casks that we have are probably the oldest casks in the world now, but that's just what I think we have without actually going around and checking everybody else's warehouses. So for us, I mean, we do work with distilleries and it's always relationship based, and for us, it's we do have a lot of old whiskey from distilleries, and we do try and get it to the market in the best way we can.
And a follow-up question to that: did Macallan bottle the 81 just to spite Gordon and MacPhail?
No, I think it'd be interesting if we hadn't done the 8-year-old. Would they have done an 8-year-old or an 81-year-old? But you know what, the market, I mean, Macallan is an amazing brand. They are pushing the boundaries of single malt whiskey, and yeah, it was good to see another whiskey come out that was we weren't quite the same age, but I'm pretty close.
Will Gordon and MacPhail be coming with an 82-year-old next year?
We are on a journey towards a 100-year-old whiskey. We've got casks identified in our warehouse that we think could go to 100 years. And that is something that we will watch these casks, see how they mature, see if the quality's still there, see if if it can actually take that age. But that would be something that
race to 100-year-old whiskey.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in that case you guys should win, because I mean, I don't know, obviously,
how many people could actually do it.
I think the only other ones that could possibly do it are the ones that have been producing. I don't know. I guess who would it be? It would possibly be Glenlivet, maybe Bowmore.
Yeah, I don't know.
You have to go back in time a little bit and see what the strategy was 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago. Right. And if it was a blend strategy, holding back whiskey to single malt probably wasn't the highest priority.
Right.
True.
That's where we get a lot of our kind of our strength in our portfolio is that we were always filling casks to be single malt. We were always pushing the boundaries of age to see what we could get to. And that is why, and this is probably one of our greatest strengths in terms of trying to mature whiskey to even the older ages, is we don't just have one cask maturing. We've got a choice of casks. So it's not like there's one cask in the warehouse that may get to 100. We've got a few more on that have the potential to get there. So
that's so cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit here, back to Benromach. Any plans in the near future to up the ABV of the core range from? I'm sure you were expecting this question. I don't know if you've heard any of our conversations before, but the Gordon and MacPhail switched a lot of their previously bottled 43% whiskeys to 46, and we're wondering if the core range will do the same for Benromach soon.
Well, there's two different kind of points there. So I'll come back to Gordon and MacPhail. I want to do the Benromach one first. Is we make award-winning liquid. Everything we enter Benromach into, it picks up really big awards, and we're really happy with the flavor profile. And so for the core range of 10, 15, and 21, there's no plans at the moment to change the ABV because we're very happy with the style and the quality of the liquid that we're producing. But we do understand there is a market out there for higher ABVs. That's why we do the cask strength offerings. That's why we do smaller batches under our contrasts, which are all 46% and non-chill filtered, and we do single cask bottlings as well. So the core range, we feel we've got it right in terms of what we're releasing, but we do understand, other releases will be more attractive to other parts of the market. So that's why we do the contrast range and those other bottlings.
Any plans to do a 25-year-old, for example, of the Benromach? Like I know recently receiving incredible awards was the Benromach 40-year-old, which I'm saving up my pennies. Hopefully one day I can pick up a bottle, but and that was cask strength, if I'm not mistaken. Any plans to do a 25 or something in that kind of range?
Not as a core release right now. Typically with the kind of strategy, doing a 10, 15, 21, it'd be 10, 15, 21, 30. If you did a 12, 18, then it'd be a 25 if you were staggering your portfolio. We want to make sure there's enough gap in the age that you're actually getting a different flavor profile coming through. I'm not sure by going 21 to 25, we'd see enough variance right now for that to really add to the portfolio. But we might come out with some 25-year-old single casks. So we'll have some whiskey, I'm sure, that'll come out because the distillery will be 25 years since we started production next year.
Wow.
Or since we restarted production.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
That's actually a great point that you brought up there. There are plenty of distilleries I find that are probably bottling whiskeys too close in age where you don't quite see the benefit from going from one of the younger ones to the older ones, whereas the gap that you guys have formed seems like it's appropriate for that kind of growth in taste anyway.
So we will always have a gap in our portfolio from the oldest whiskies we have just now in our warehouse would be 24 years that we've distilled ourselves. But we do have older casks, which were filled before the distillery closed in 1983. So the distillery was silent from 1983 to 1998. So there's a 15-year gap there. And that's where the 40-year-old stock comes from. So that's part of our heritage range. So it's distillate that we didn't distill. It's either casks we bought with the distillery, and in some cases it's casks that we used to fill under Gordon and MacPhail as well. So those are currently coming out as a batch release of cask strength. So roughly about 1,000 bottles. The 2021 edition won Best in Show at the San Francisco Wine and Spirits competition this year. The 2022 edition has been very well received as well. And we'll have other releases that come out from that. But we are working with finite stock. I guess in hindsight, if we had known we were going to buy Benromach in the future, we should have filled more casks under Gordon and MacPhail when we had access to it back in those days.
Good point.
Yeah. Official bottlings.
Yeah.
Essentially, right?
Yeah. But you did ask about the liquid in the distillery label is going to 46%. These are very small batches that are produced from these. It's not thousands of cases a year, it's hundreds of cases. And that is aimed at a slightly more, there's a bit more of a specialist market. So using cask selection, we can actually retain the balance and make sure we're offering the right quality. And we did raise the ABV. That was a change that came in through COVID. And it's one that I think really does work for that range. And you'll see that in all of the two labels going forward. It makes it non-chill filtered. It's more that kind of fits in that kind of G&M side of it quite well. That means we only offer one range under Gordon and MacPhail, which is non-chill filtered, which is our Discovery range, which is a range of like 11 and 13-year-old whiskies from distilleries like Kalila, Glenrothes, Glen Grant.
Do you see a change in consumer tendencies of going to higher ABV whiskeys? Do you see that selling more in certain markets, or is there still the largest whiskey markets you guys sell in, they still prefer maybe a little lower, more approachable ABV, like a 40 or 43?
I think you got to fact there's a bit of context on this. The size of business that we are, there's consumers that want lower strengths and higher strengths, but we're not trying to sell millions of casks. It's quite low numbers. I mean, Canada is a market that has been growing for us year on year. We've got great partners in the market, like James and the Authentic team are doing an amazing job, and we're seeing great growth at Benromach, our core range in the market. We've also seen lots of single casks coming into the market as well. And I think there is probably an increasing market for these kind of unique single casks that once they're gone, they're gone. A couple hundred bottles, maybe 100 bottles, maybe in some cases only 60 bottles. And then we're seeing that coming through there as well. But I think every market is different. I spent a lot of time traveling around Asia before COVID. And there was definitely a tendency more for high strength, cask strength whiskies there. And I probably see in the US, as an example, that there's a mixture of both. Everyday whiskies at 43%, 46%. But this, again, there's still a growing market for single cask strength offerings.
Mm-hmm. This whiskey is out of control.
My last sip of that was it was ridiculously like raisiny, like sweetness, but then was coffee, and there was like cocoa kind of notes to it, that like steeped tea kind of note, like a black tea kind of note. Just what a beautiful whiskey, what a fantastic, every time I drink a Gordon and MacPhail, I know I'm drinking something excellent, but the last few that we had the luxury of trying were absolutely phenomenal, and really like hard to replicate these experiences. Like it's once in a lifetime.
And I'm incredibly jealous right now because I will never ever get to try that whiskey again in my entire life, because it's all sold. It's all different countries around the world. We have no more. I've got no more sample packs that I'm aware of to try that whiskey, and so that will be a whiskey that I have tried before, and it's amazing. And I'll have to look to the next one that comes out next year, and hopefully that will be. I'm sure it will be equally as good as that one, but it'll be different though. It won't be exactly the same.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you have spoiled us yet again and given us such a huge honor to be able to try these, moments in time. They're really just like a piece of history in a glass, which is really cool to us. And, that's why we love whiskey.
When I started this channel, well, Whiskey in the Six, we started the Whisky Rant a little bit later after Jeremy started his channel, Sipper Social Club. But if you would have told me before I started the channel that there would be a time where we'd be trying an 80-year-old Gordon and MacPhail, and then another, what do we say this was? 67 years old. I would have
a mere youngster of a whiskey.
Right. Yeah. I would have laughed. I would have, been like,
sure.
Okay,
well, because
not delusional.
The 80-year-old didn't even exist, right? It didn't exist in the world.
But this is what we can do at Gordon and MacPhail, is we can showcase products from so many different distilleries and let everyone try something that's different. A key thing about what we do is about complementing distillery offerings, not competing. So we do different maturations, different ages. A lot of our whiskies, which are really old, there's limited kind of distillery offerings available. So complementing and offering these older whiskies is definitely a big part of what Gordon and MacPhail does.
So many cool things coming out of Gordon and MacPhail right now. Can you speak to maybe like one, bottling that's on the horizon that we can expect to maybe see that's maybe a little more wide reaching that you are excited about?
Yeah, well, it's hard to mention this one, but probably one of our biggest releases this year was our Milton 1949. And this is a whiskey from a distillery that changed its name in the early 50s. So it never actually released single malt under the name Milton. So it changed its name back to Strathyla. I think it was either 1950 or 1951. And we actually tried to buy that distillery, but it went bankrupt as well at that time. And my great-grandfather and grandfather went there, went to an auction, and I believe we were the second last bidder in the auction, and we lost out to Chivas Brothers. So you still want it today. So that whiskey there, I mean, you're going to try a cask from a distillery that's no longer called Milton. They never released whiskey under that name, Milton. And again, it's another youngster of a whiskey at 72 years old.
Oh.
So that is, I mean, that is something that we can never recreate in the future. We'll never have another Milton cask ever, because we don't fill there. And unless the distillery changes its name back to Milton, they won't have one either. So that was an incredibly exciting and really kind of a great kind of whiskey story for Gordon and MacPhail. We just launched our closed distilleries as well, the Recollection series. So that's a collection of whiskies which are from distilleries which are no longer in production. And that will be something that we probably repeat next year and the year after and the year after and the year after until we run out of closed distilleries. So that's a very exciting one as well. And then we're going to have a Benromach coming out under Gordon and MacPhail as well, which is something that we've not done for quite a long time. And that is one that we could probably tell you more about in kind of Q1 next year. But that'll be exciting to see a Gordon and MacPhail whiskey coming out. And if you factor in what Gordon and MacPhail stands for about complementing, not competing with distillery offerings, it's not going to be a standard maturation that's the same as what we do. It's not taking a 40-year-old cask for Benromach and just sticking it in the Gordon and MacPhail bottle. It's going to be a different maturation coming through there. So that'll be I'm quite excited to see that one come into market as well.
I mean, you have the dream job. I mean, obviously your family. And let's talk about real quick the picture behind us. This is the original Gordon MacPhail grocery store. That's how it all started, right?
Yeah. So back in 1895, when Gordon MacPhail opened, we had one part of the ground floor of that shop. In the first year of trading, my great-grandfather, John Urquhart, joined the business. And then he worked his way up the business to be junior partner, then senior partner. And then in 1915 was sole owner. So you can actually see John Urquhart in the middle there. He's the one in the center with the bowler hat and the bike. Right there, yeah. And he was the one that kind of bought the business. So he started the kind of family's kind of journey with Gordon and MacPhail. I quite often get asked, why didn't we change the name to John Urquhart and Son or something different? And by that point, the business had been operating in his hometown of Elgin for 20 years. It had an established name. So I think the name was retained just because it was a local business that had a name that was recognized. And that's why it's been owned by the Urquhart family for over 100 years, but it still retains that name, Gordon and MacPhail.
Really cool.
Very cool.
But over the years, we've expanded. So we don't have one section of that shop now. We have the whole shop. And it is you can go there and you can get some kind of great whiskey experiences, and the team there look after you, and you get to do flights of whiskeys and get to learn all about Gordon and MacPhail and our history. But there is one point about the shop that might be worth mentioning. You can't quite see the windows above the shop there, but those are all kind of offices which were rented by distilleries. So if you go up to the top floor, you look at these old kind of offices. The business used to be run out there completely up until the early 1990s. So it was a place that I would spend a lot of my childhood when my dad was working. And all these offices have letterboxes on them. And that was because distilleries would rent them, and they'd be their town office for banking and other kind of administration. And that's probably how we started to build relationships, because we had distillers in the same building as we were.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that'd be a place to visit.
Right?
Yeah. Love the
history. One day we'll meet you there, Richard.
Well, you know what? If we do manage to get you across and get you up to see us, it would be amazing to show you the three parts of the business. So start and see how single malt whiskey was brought to the market 100 years ago through Gordon and MacPhail and our kind of house of single malt whiskey. Go to Benromach and see how old school Speyside whiskey is made. See how every valve is turned by hand. See Keith and his team actually turn every valve, do everything without any automation at all. And then let's go to the cairn, see a modern distillery, work our way through it, and end up at our kind of whiskey tasting room, overlooking the River Spey, the Cairngorm Mountains behind, and drink some whiskies that are in a style that we can't try for another 12, 18, 70 years in the future.
That sounds like an incredible trip. I think I'm available July 1st.
Yeah, it's like, how does next weekend sound? You available?
I think after 3 weeks of traveling, I'm going to have a weekend off this weekend. So. but the weekend after is fine.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a dream trip for us to witness and see that stuff would be so cool. So cool.
Absolutely.
Well, Richard, you have honored us yet again. We are forever grateful.
Absolutely.
And forever in your debt for experiencing these amazing whiskeys. Yeah, we can't say thank you enough. I mean, just mind blown how good this stuff is.
It was incredible.
And thank you so much for having me on here and letting me talk about my family, our whiskeys. And the only downside was I wish I'd kept the sample pack so I could have shared the whiskey with you, because as I said, incredibly jealous but that means that I am drinking one of my favorite whiskeys, which is Benromach 15. So our 15 whiskey is probably one of the family favorite whiskeys that we have in our portfolio. So it's not bad for a consolation dram.
All right, Richard. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. I mean,
thank you so much.
It's been awesome.
Really, really.
That was great. Thank you for having me and Slange, and enjoy the whiskey.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Do you know the Canadian connection to Benromach? Have you heard this one before?
No.
So Sean Hobbs, so the company that owns Authentic, is owned by Duncan Hobbs. His uncle, Joseph Hobbs, used to own Benromach Distillery in the 1930s, along with Ben Nevis and Glen. So it's not the only reason why we've seen great success in Canada, but it's nice we're working with a company that has a connection to our distillery, because it used to be their distillery.
That's really cool.
That's really cool.